Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the Lower East Side here in the city, powered by the East Side Community Network and sponsored by none other than the Ford Foundation, a new content partner to the newbridgedetroit.com. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Givens-Davidson.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people on the East Side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. This episode, we're delighted to welcome back Kim Trent. Kim serves as the Deputy Director for Prosperity at the State of Michigan's Labor and Economic Opportunity Department, and she serves on the Governor's Poverty Task Force. And she is here to talk about some of the recommendations from the task force. Kim, welcome back to Authentically Detroit.
Oh, Orlando, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
We're so happy to have you. Listen, your resume is extensive. I could have spent 10 minutes reading everything that you've been able to do and accomplish, but I kept it short to your current role. But in case y'all don't know, it's Kim Trent on the podcast, y'all, and y'all better go. She's Googleable. Google her, put her name in your Google browser, and figure out what's up.
Be careful, I got detractors too, so be careful about who you Google when you're talking about me.
They say if they're not talking about you, they're not thinking about you, Kim.
That's
you know
true.
what? When you get to a certain level, if you don't have detractors, you're not doing something right, okay?
New levels, new devils. That's what they
right.
say.
And I heard that first when I was at Vanguard. And I became an executive director for the first time, and I realized what that meant. I was like, wow, where are my friends at? Where are my people? And right around the time I was working there, I met this woman named Kim Trent, who was at the time Governor Granholm's Detroit District Director or whatever. I was so intimidated. She would come in the office and Pastor Van would be like, Kim Trent is coming to the office today. So I'm so happy.
I'm glad I hit it well because I'm intimidated by y'all. Who would be intimidated about that Donna Givens-Davidson brain? That's a brain for you right there.
That is a whole brain.
That is a whole brain.
Google, everything is stored up in that brain, and it's quick. It's real quick.
That's like when Ivy League comes and plucks you up. Like, we need you to come teach our people because you real smart.
Okay, yeah. Columbia, can somebody say Columbia University?
If you don't know, Google it.
Google it. Let's just say that both Donna Givens-Davidson and Kim Trent got Google extensive Google pages. I'm so excited.
Oh, you're pretty Googleable too, Orlando.
You know what? Kim and I are Googleable, but we don't have our own websites, okay? Orlando P. Bailey, don't forget to because I looked it up and it looked like I said, maybe he made this up, but I added a P and there he was. But looking like about to come.
It's about y'all. It's about the great thing. You guys have been doing such great things for a long time, and I've been able to learn from both of you. So if anything, the reason why I'm able to have a website and I'm Googleable is because y'all were first. Y'all were the forerunners for a lot of folks, including myself. It's sunny outside. It's Monday. It's a lot to cover today, but before we get into the crux of everything, how are y'all? How are you, human? Donna, how are you, the human, the mother, the sister, the wife, the daughter? How you doing?
Well, it's my daughter's 29th birthday. My second child's 29th birthday, so I'm feeling old. I was 29 when I had her, and it is now her 29th birthday. So that gives you a sense. I was almost 29. I turned 29 in September. So that's good. I've been had a lot of projects I'm working on. And this past weekend, I worked a lot, and I felt kind of bad because I work a lot anyway. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of newlywed, but sorry, I'm too busy to really spend much time.
You knew who he was marrying.
He did. And he was cool. We just, every once in a while, just talked a few minutes. But working on a lot of projects and feeling good about the work. I love the sunshine. And I am so glad to be here with my friend, Kim. Let me tell you a little story about how Kim and I became friends. My sister, my younger sister, Elizabeth, we call her Betty Ann, said, you have to meet Kim Trent. I've known of Kim. I've moved around in the same circles. And she says, you just have to spend time with her. I just feel like you guys will just love each other. And so we had lunch, and it was
That's what I actually forgot about that. So you just, because when you were saying how we met, I was like, how did we? Because you know, there's some people, I mean, even though we're relatively recent friends, you kind of feel like you've always been my friend, because we did just instantly click. And yeah, when you said, I was like, oh yeah, we did go to lunch that time. I forgot about that.
How long were y'all at lunch?
Huh?
How long did y'all lunch for?
Loud. We've been you know, almost put out of some of the best establishments in Detroit.
Till after lunch, okay? My sister had to go back to work, and Kim and I stayed. That's all I want you to know about it. So we just had this connection. I know there's that term, no new friends, but that's not true.
That
And
is
as
so
long
not
as
true.
I'm living, I'm so grateful to make new friends. So Kim, welcome. And of course, Orlando now of the website, Orlando P. Bailey. very, very blessed.
How you doing, Kim? How are you?
It's funny. That's the Meghan Markle question now, because remember when someone asked her that and she was like, you know, caught like a deer in the headlights because no one had thought to ask her that question in a year.
No.
I'm blessed that people have asked me that question, and it's a
Right.
day
Don't
by
be
day
silent.
proposition. I feel um, very grateful that I have had both of my vaccination shots. Got my second, I'm in Club Moderna with a double shot. My husband
No
has.
Johnson and Johnson in this house, right?
Are you're Johnson and Johnson?
Listen, no Johnson and Johnson here.
Oh,
Drink Moderna, okay?
my favorite cousin got Johnson and Johnson. She was so excited, and I kind of want to call her like, "How you doing, girl?"
How
I'll
you
be
doing?
fine, I know, but you know,
Yeah.
it's so hard because you know, a lot of I really feel committed to sharing the story about how important it is for us to get vaccinated in the context of understanding why there is hesitancy. Because I think sometimes some people you know, almost feel like people are superstitious or they're ignorant or whatever, but vaccine hesitancy is logical. I mean, it's logical when you are only looking at how this country has treated Black people.
That's
Now,
it.
if you look at this particular situation where you have a worldwide pandemic, first of all, having known the federal government as it's been executed over the last 4 years, I don't have any faith that they would be organized enough to have a conspiracy that only Black people. I mean, really, do you know how well organized, how many people would have to be in on it? They ain't that together to make that happen. You know, Tuskegee was a horrible thing, but it was, you know, they were able to restrict it to a certain number of, you know,
Yeah.
morally compromised people who decided to do it. Going to every place that Black people are to give us the bad shot, we're not organized to do that enough to do that. So get your shots, people. But anyway, I do feel very blessed to have gotten it. I hoping I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm also realistic about the fact that last week I had 3 friends in the hospital with COVID. So I'm just trying to be really intentional about lifting that up in every conversation I have, because it's just important, and we want to live, and we want to, you know, this is an election year for our city. There's just so much that is powerful that's happening right now. We know we got to continue to fight for our voting rights. There's so many things, we got to be alive for it. So you know, we just have to do everything in our power to protect our health. And you know, I just feel really blessed that I was able to get those shots.
Yeah, I am
And
too,
you
Kim.
too,
I'm one of those people who's really hard on people, partly because some of what I see makes me so angry. I see people putting out information which is misinformation and repeating it, intelligent, educated people. And I feel as though we have a responsibility in the midst of the pandemic to speak life into situations. There are certainly issues with
absolutely.
the experiment where, by the way, treatment wasn't given, treatment was withheld. Okay. So when you look at the fact that
Correct.
now we are intentionally self-withholding access to the types of medications that can help us. And there are people who are seizing on statements, and just some of the things I've seen where people are being bullied when they say they're considering getting a vaccine, and people are jumping on their posts and saying, don't trust those white coats, don't do this, don't do that, and bringing everything up. And it feels to me like it feels irresponsible. I'm going to be honest.
Oh no, I completely agree with you, Donna.
And we have a responsibility as, I think I've earned the right to be an elder. I don't know if I'm there yet. You know, I like to think of myself as young, but I'm probably not anymore. I'm not even middle. Anyway, but the point is,
you're young enough,
right? Like, but I think that those of us who have lived long enough and experienced enough have a responsibility to pave the way and shine a guiding light and let people know we're going to be okay if we follow these rules. Because it feels to me like Donald Trump unleashed some craziness. And I hate even using that name, but crazy anti-science beliefs, crazy superstitions and everything like that, and added to the realistic knowledge of racism and how we've been treated in this country. It's a toxic mix. And we've got to pull some of that back and say, you know what? We don't have to believe in every single thing. But what we do know is our people are dying. And we have a responsibility to do our part, and it's not a personal decision. Public health is not about you. Public health is about us. And there is.
Well, you know, I was talking to my husband. Tom Brokaw has this term about talking about the greatest generation, although, you know, I would put an asterisk by that description of that particular group, because those are the same folks who were preventing our folks from voting. You know, the greatest generation are, you know, I mean, but
training fire.
I will say this. My husband and I were like, just imagine if we were in World War II and only thing you had to do was only thing you had to do was like not have sugar. You know, have ration sugar or ration gasoline with these numbnuts who are you know, who we're dealing with today, who don't even want to put a piece of cloth over their face so that they don't get sick. Forget about other people. You know, it's just it's really tragic. So
yeah, remember polio? And people had to take polio shots. And I'm afraid that we're going to have to actually see more human suffering. And now we're seeing kids. So anyway, Orlando, how are you? Let me check with you in this very grim conversation.
I'm happy that I'm really happy that the sun is out. I got to tell you that this weekend I've been struggling with, number one, just a heavy heart. And your body knows trauma and recognizes trauma, even though you try to tell your mind that it's okay. And I think the culmination of so many horrible anniversaries from last year, and the murder that we once again saw on camera of Dante Wright, a 20-year-old Black man, father, one, and mixed with my anxiety around this COVID thing. Like, I am in the house again. Like, I don't want nobody to come near me. Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of going through it. And so it was really, really great today. We're recording. It's Monday when we record, Tuesday when we record, and the sun is shining in Detroit. And I was able to just go to Belle Isle and sit by the river and take in some of that sun in the car. But it's a time of struggle, and I imagine that I am not an anomaly. So I wanted to give voice to that for folks today. If you're not okay, it's okay that you're not okay, but we'll get to okay. We'll get to better. As long as we keep striving. So far, I have and you have survived every horrible day that you've experienced, that I've experienced, and we will continue to survive. So keep
Orlando,
that.
can I just give you a shout out for going and sitting by the water?
Yes.
I mean, seriously, because the word of the day is self-care. And we should be so proud of those moments that we give ourselves permission to indulge in that. We have to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a moment in history. I know one day we'll look back like, how in the world did we get through this? And we're going to get through it because of those moments of self-care, of other care. We just have to be so intentional about it because, particularly with people like us who deeply care about other people.
Yes.
And, people bring us projects, oh, do this and do that. And, oh, can you help us with this? And, we want to help everybody.
Mhm.
But it's so corny now. It seems corny, but I remember when I first heard the saying that you have to put on your mask first before you can put a mask on the people you love. And at the time, I was like, that is the most profound statement I've ever heard. But because it was me, I was not putting on my mask, and I still don't to some degree. But I remember the first time I heard it, I was just blown away because I was so indicted. I was like, yep, not putting on my mask, definitely not doing it. So,
That's so
but
funny because my therapist brought that out on Monday. She was like, we were just having this conversation because I'm like, yo, can you talk? I need a sesh. And,
right,
and
and
she,
good for you for sharing that.
yeah.
I come from a family of mental health professionals, and I don't know, I ain't never had no shame about going to talk to somebody. I mean,
Never.
and it's funny having talked to people I really love who I don't believe in therapy. And people have a right to their path. But I just think of all of the pain and suffering and you know what we're seeing in these streets right now with the violence. That's a manifestation of hurt. People are hurting, and they reject healing because they have these preconceived notions about masculinity, or I gotta
Being
rely on
Christian,
God or
being
whatever
religious, all
foolishness
that.
prevents people
Yep.
from going to get help. I'm all about getting help. I just
We
believe
have
it's
to
so
have a show
important.
about that.
I've
We
done
have
it many
a whole show.
times. I'm going to do it again. It's
Yeah,
important. It's important. Sometimes you need to talk to somebody who's not in your family,
that's
who's
right.
not your pastor, who's not among your friends. Sometimes you just need to talk to someone who is a sounding board, who's a professional.
Yeah.
And good for you for being a young Black man who has the courage to step outside of the silliness. It's really just silly,
Yeah. I'm trying to
that we have
normalize it.
around getting help. Let's
We have
normalize it.
to
I love
normalize
it.
it. We have to normalize it and talk about it like we've always been talking about, even though we haven't. Just like talk about it and bring it up so that people are like, oh, okay, and begin that
Right.
conversation because we need it.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. It's
What?
time for
How
fresh
do
off
you
the
live
press.
in Detroit and not need help?
Right. Well,
We all need it desperately.
how could you be
We
a Black
do.
American living through
Anywhere.
intergenerational trauma, watching what's on television, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with everything we've had to deal with, and now that the lynchings are televised or video, it's worse.
Whew.
It's like because you can't get away from it. So yeah.
I
It's
wanted to
time.
call a therapist the first time I saw. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I hate to rank which ones have been the worst because they've all been terrible. But um, I'm trying to. There was one that after I watched the video, I just said I feel like I have to cleanse my soul
Yeah.
after watching this because it is. I'm devastated. For a person I didn't know. Um, um, who Elijah McClain is the one that just
Yeah.
sent me.
Yeah.
I still cannot watch that. I can't watch that video. I can't. Um,
Nor should you.
Yeah.
like, who can you be and not be a threat? There is absolutely nothing threatening about that young man. He was just, his gentleness was just so apparent. And if they could kill him, no one is safe. Who has brown skin, you know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
anyway.
Anyway, it's time for fresh off the press news that we are thinking about. If you have pieces that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. Donna, fresh off the press.
Fresh off the press, community activists. The Safer Detroit begins with the people. This is by Bryce Huffman. in Bridge, Detroit. It was published yesterday, and the beautiful woman on the cover of that, Leah Harvey Quinn, came to work under me when she was like 23 years old, a real hothead, and to see her, she even acknowledges, but she just had so much passion. Okay. And when young people are passionate, sometimes they can be difficult for older people, although she wasn't hard for me, because I enjoyed her passion and her intensity. But she is now leading Force Detroit, which is a grassroots project that's designed to engage returning citizens and millennials in Detroit. And she's working to reunify Detroiters in efforts to make the city safer for residents. So, she says breaking down violence is about building relationships one person at a time and building those transformative relationships within a small neighborhood. That's why it takes coalition of organizations across the city who have been doing this work for years. And so I read this today, and even as we're looking at what happened in Minnesota, even as we are dealing with the trial of murderer Derek Chauvin, um, we also are dealing with a lot of crime inside of our community. A lot of times we're so focused on how people die at the hands of police that we don't think about how they were living before they died.
Mm.
But there is so much trauma that we are all dealing with in our communities, and people who are poor, a lot of the people who die at the hands of police, this was not their first traumatic encounter, it was just the last.
Mm, mm.
Mm.
So when you think about traumatic encounters, think about schools, think about foster care or children's homes, think about, housing issues and people losing housing and mass incarceration. And these things all impact Black bodies. And so people say, well, you need to deal with Black on Black crime before you deal with police violence, as though all of this is not an outcome of racism. Every single aspect of it is an outcome of racism. Police attitudes, Black and white police attitudes towards Black people, is an outcome of a racist system. We can't train police. We had this conversation online a little bit. Can you train police? Jamon Jordan had the brilliant statement, and I'm going to try to get it right. He said, there's no training that will work other than this: treat Black people like white people. Period. End of point.
Boom.
Okay. Boom. All the training in the world, what the outcome is what we're going to go for. But anyway, inside of our community, we are dealing with a lot of violence. We're dealing with a lot of trauma. And that trauma is rooted in violence. That trauma, when you talk about needing therapy, we need trauma interventions at so many different levels and so much therapy. And some of that has to do with relationship building. It has to do with young people feeling hurt and disappointed and violated sometimes since before they can remember. DMX, look at DMX. DMX was able to channel his trauma into a brilliant music career, but it failed him short at 50, right? And
Mm.
so, at some point, we've got to quit pretending like we overcame racism in America. And, those of us who thought we overcame because we have nice things and we have good jobs and we live in nice places, some of us have to remember we're still here, Black people in America.
Mm-hmm.
It can happen to us, but it can also happen to people who look like us, and we're all traumatized by it. So, how
Mm-hmm.
do we as a community not allow people like Alea and all of those community groups do it alone? But how do we put our arms around them and say, we are, as a Detroit community, going to be there with them, going to be there with our brothers and sisters who all come from essentially the same place, but they're still there. We deal with
Mm-hmm.
racism. Racism is somebody calling me out my name, right? Racism is a boss who mistreats me. Racism might even be a teacher who does not speak to my child nicely. But for some people, racism is not having a place to live, living in a foster care home, having a parent falsely accused and incarcerated, multiple run-ins with the police. So it's all kind of on this continuum. And there's some people who have it harder. And those are the people who you see a lot of times just having very little self-control, having a lot of conflict with each other, getting engaged in underground economies because the legitimate economy has no place for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what it just made me think of. It just made me realize we got to go back to our roots and really be a support for people. And also just want to honor Alea because, she's doing her thing.
Alea is a force. She's the executive director of First Detroit. Donna, I appreciate what you're saying, especially around wrapping our arms around the Live Free Coalition and Force Detroit and the work that they're doing inside neighborhoods. A quick note, if you want to get involved with the coalition, you can join the coalition, you can get involved with Force Detroit. Just call 248-320-5315. We'll also put it in the description, but again, it's 248-320-5315. Donna, what you are talking about, it to me is talking about root causes of racism, root causes of why our people show up the way that they do in various situations. It's been a year since Hakeem Littleton, another Black male who was gunned down by police after shooting at the police last year in the city of Detroit, and Prosecutor Worthy decided, in her office decided that they could not bring charges against the police officer or the Detroit Police Department, as the department acted in self-defense. And one of the things that you said that was really striking was, what was the life he was living before that encounter? And I think we really have to stop, pause, and become a little bit more media literate and think about those root causes when these kinds of situations come up, because we will slay him, hang him on the cross for making the decision that he made in that moment. But what was his life like? What had society and what had his life experiences taught him when police are coming at him, right? And so, it's deep and it's layered. So thankful to Alea Harvey Quinn, F. Carlton Peoples, and Keith Bennett, the Godfather, for doing that work.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Orlando, fresh off the press.
Fresh off the press, the city halts use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So over the weekend and this morning, news broke that out of about 6 million, give or take, Johnson & Johnson vaccines that have been injected in Americans, there are 6 cases of women who have reported blood clots, and at least one of those women have passed on. And so the FDA has recommended a pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and the city of Detroit, as well as the state of Michigan, have, of course, halted injecting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Here's what we need you to know. If you were scheduled for a vaccine appointment and that you were going to take the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, please do not cancel your appointment, and please do not show up to your appointment. In its stead, the distribution of Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine will take its place. And so far, experts have not reported any of the blood clot symptoms in Pfizer patients and in Moderna patients. And so it's 6 people out of 6 million. I don't even know if that even qualifies as a percentage, just like, or even if that really makes a dent in the percentage. But the system is paying very close attention to this, and because of these cases, they stopped. So this is actually good news, right? The system is working, right? They are trying to figure out, it's a pause. I'm wondering though, and I would love to get your opinion on this, Donna and Kim, what that does for the COVID-19 vaccine push in the state of Michigan. We need about 70% of Michiganders to reach herd immunity right now. I think we're at about 40. We have, as you guys were stating earlier, vaccination conspiracy theories and skeptics, and there's an outright campaign to get folks vaccinated. And at the same time, COVID cases are surging in our state, record numbers. Is this going to help or hurt?
I mean, it's going to hurt because some people are looking for a reason. I've been reading people's posts. I'm masochistic like that. And people say, well, I'll just take my chances with a 99.7 survival rate. Where they got that statistic, well, I know they got it from Trump and some of those other folks who don't wear masks and keep on trying to negate and downplay the seriousness of the disease, even as children go into the hospital. But even if you survive it, the chances of you, actually having some type of prolonged injury are still there. I mean, and we don't know the long term impact for some people, especially those who had significant organ damage. So, um, I think there's not a great deal of information out there. It takes me back to my earliest days of professional work when I worked for the Community Health Awareness Group, which was an HIV/AIDS prevention organization. And in trying to educate people, we hired people who were like those people to be health educators. They started out being outreach workers and they heard the term ethnographers and they changed their job title because it was a lot more, impressive. But we
Mhm.
hired returning citizens. We hired people who had been on the streets, LGBTQ men and women who had credibility and could speak to their own about this. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
even as I lose my cool with some people, I also understand I'm not a reliable source for everybody, right?
Mhm.
And so I can speak to my people, and some of them are going to listen to me because they see me as a reliable source. We need
Mhm.
to do a whole lot more getting folks who are the kind of folks that people believe in. I'm not talking about Halle Berry or Denzel Washington. I'm talking about folks who are able to influence people who are like them in the city. And I hope that the city takes heed of what we've known about public health, and that is people listen to their own. Because
Mhm.
that's the only way. You can't use statistics. Because first of all, people don't even understand statistics. It may not have passed statistics, and they don't understand it.
They
We're
probably never took it. Most people haven't taken statistics to even pass,
exactly.
right?
I hated it.
So, but if that one chapter in econ, that was the one you didn't do so well on, right? Or the math or algebra, you're just not dealing well with that. And rather than, a lot of research has shown that storytelling is more influential in changing people's behavior than
Mhm.
all of these numbers. And so I would love for the chief storytelling officer, Eric Thomas, if you're listening, I have a job for you to get to work deploying storytellers. But I
Mhm.
think the other thing is that we have to do a better job of being firm in our stance, in our facts. I get it. Everybody has the right to their opinion, but everybody does not have a right to their own facts, and facts are what they are. And so we need to be firm in that and continue countering lies because it's been going
Absolutely.
on for some time. So I think that some people are going to seize on that and say, see, I told you, putting that stuff, that experimental stuff in your body. So here's the question I posed, and it made some people angry. Somebody called me a bully, but so be it. If you don't want to take an experimental vaccine, if you get COVID, all of the treatments are experimental. Are you rejecting those experiments too? At what point do you recognize this is all new? Everything that is done for this is going to be experimental. Luckily,
Mhm.
we have trained virologists, one of whom we had on our show two
Last week.
weeks ago. Was it last week or 2 weeks
2 weeks
ago?
ago, you're right.
One of them we had on the show 2 weeks ago, who's been doing this for a long time. There's the ability
Mhm.
to create vaccines has grown and grown and grown.
And I
Um,
think that's an important, if I can just say, Donna,
so
because first of all, you just said two things that I want to, if I could just respond to, because I think when you talked about the people who are talking to people have to be the people who are like those people, that is so powerful. I know my father in his work as a substance use disorder expert was such a huge believer in peer recovery support networks. Um, Someone who's never used is just a lot of times, although my father was, never actually, we all have our addictions, but he never was, he never had a substance use disorder. And he had a lot of influence, but he recognized that someone who's walked that walk and has made it to the other side is just going to have, a lot more credibility. And I just think that it's so powerful that we acknowledge that we have to deploy everybody who it can't just be the usual suspects. In all due respect to the usual, I'm not somebody who like to just knock down the usual suspects just because they're the usual suspects, because usually people become the usual suspects because they're doing the work. So, there's some people who just specialize in knocking folks down. I'm not that person. I think usually if you emerge as a leader is because you've led. Some people emerge as leaders, like our former president.
Oh Lord.
Uh, because I don't even know. I can't even answer that question how he emerged. I still don't get it. But I mean, but there are but there are a lot of, I would say, the people at a grassroots level who emerge. It's because they've done something. So they have their place. But I think those people who are walking beside you who have lived through this, who have almost died, I know so many people in my circle whose stories are so powerful. There's a place for them to tell them, to share them, so that people recognize this is a real thing. I mean, I'm always astonished when I talk to people in Detroit who don't know anyone who's died from COVID. I mean, I just am like, am I just cursed? Because why do I know so many people
I was getting
who
ready
died?
to
I
say,
mean, part of it,
why
I
do
think
I know
that we
some
all,
folks? Right. Jeez.
but I have encountered people who are like, I don't know anybody who's died from COVID. And I'm like, you are extraordinarily blessed.
Less.
Just have so much gratitude for that, because it's not the norm. I mean, most people around here, even if you don't know anyone who's died, you know someone who's been very ill with it. It's a real thing. And I just think that it's really powerful for us to really think about how we are going to really deploy everybody to, tell those stories in a really meaningful way. So, I guess I'll give a shout out to Eric Thomas too, because I think that, you know, Donna has given you an assignment that I think is really powerful. I'm sure that, there's some storytelling that's happening. We know that Rochelle Riley had the very powerful display on at Belle Isle that I think certainly told a story, just in the visuals of seeing those beautiful faces, definitely was a form of storytelling. But that one-on-one, I just don't think you can discount it.
Nope, you definitely cannot discount it. Listen, if you have pieces that you want discussed on the podcast, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. Kim, yes, we're on to you. The governor announced and signed the executive order to form the Poverty Task Force in December of 2019. Where at? Guess where? At the East Side Community Network office.
Right.
Who knew just a few months later, the problems she outlined in her remarks will be laid bare by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we want to talk to you a little bit about the Poverty Task Force, some of its recommendations, big picture, and how we move forward. And so, Donna?
All right, Kim. So, especially when I first met you back in the day, I've been talking about poverty for a while. And people have not liked talking about poverty. And you say poor, and it's like, that's an insult. People don't like being called poor. Um, so people have preferred euphemisms like low income over the word poor. Why is that?
It's because we have had at least 40-year campaign, but it kind of ramped up even before that. But we know that the standard bearer for it was Ronald Reagan, who created the term welfare queens. And there has been a very successful concerted effort to vilify the poor in our country. In a way that is hard to get around. And I really do see that as a big part. A big part of my job is the policies part of it. I want to change and put structural changes in state government, so that people who are living in poverty can do so with dignity, can have the staples of life, but more importantly, have a path to leave poverty. So I am really passionate about that, but I also recognize that a big part of my job also is destigmatizing poverty. Poverty is on purpose. There are people who are living in poverty because of policy decisions that people have made. And I think one of the, I've been reading a lot of Ibram Kendi lately, and oh my goodness, one of the powerful, most powerful kind of observations that he makes in his work is that I think that even in my mind, I have 2 degrees, right. I have 2 degrees in Black studies. And even I had never really challenged this paradigm of policies are racist because people are racist, and then people create the poverty. I mean, racism. People create policy based on their racism when really it's the other way around. Just think about that. Policy is created and it creates racism.
Mhm.
Woodrow Wilson created a housing structure in America that was based on segregation in places where there was no segregation.
Mhm.
Places where people didn't even have those, structured governmental things. The government imposed it. And then people said, you're right, I don't want to be around Black people because something was imposed upon them by a policy decision. And so, to the extent that I can change policy, I want to do that, but I also want to change hearts and minds. And that's the harder work.
Yeah.
If you have been taught your whole life that poor people, and even poor people, revile poor people. I mean, we live in a country where it's like, I don't mind getting government help, but I don't want him to get it. I don't want my neighbor to get it. I don't want those people over there to get it. When you look at just the policies that have been consistently designed to hurt people who are living in poverty, and the poor are making choices by either not voting or voting for people who don't have their best interest because they're driven. And I'm not vilifying poor people with that. I'm just saying I see the game. The game is, race is elevated above class and everything else. And so there are people who make choices that are 100% against their own economic interests because they are convinced that I would much rather I'll be poor as long as they're poor too. I'll remain poor. I want them to be poor too.
When you bring up race, it just makes me think of Robin DiAngelo in her book White Fragility. And she mentioned the
Mm-hmm.
fact that, white people a lot of times don't use the term Black. They say Black. They whisper like bad words. And we treat Blackness like we treat poverty, right? There's this kind of correlation in my mind. When I read that, I was like, wow, why is it that we do that? And so now we don't have Black people, we'll say people of color or minorities. Talking about Black people, but saying minorities because it's impolite to use the word Black. It's like, oh, I'm Black and I'm proud.
I'm
Okay.
Black.
Please do
Black,
not
blackity black.
it, shout it, okay, from the rooftops. Because when I say I'm blackity black, and I'm happy to be Black. I'm not ashamed of being Black. What I don't like about being Black is the way racist, broken white people treat my Blackness. It is not Blackness, okay? Poor people are some of the greatest survivors on earth. I used to want to do a survivor television show that had middle class people going into the hood and living off food stamps and AFDC payments, okay? We're going to take this and you figure out how to raise your kids here. You figure out how to make things happen. Rather than reviling people, look at the fact that our people, because our people, there was a time when being Black was almost synonymous with being poor. Now we have a little bit of, whatever. But look at the fact that our people were able to make $1 out of 25 cents, and most people can't even figure out how to keep $1 a dollar. You know what I mean? I just think that the stigma is there. The way that what white people have done and what white supremacy has done is it has treated everybody they oppress like they're the ones who have the problems and not the people who are doing the oppressing. And we got to turn that around. So
can I jump in really quickly? And Kim, I want to ask you this question around racial equity, since we're on the topic of race. In the Poverty Task Force report, it is stated that each of the 35 or so recommendations and all of the state departments that were consulted looked at this work and did this work from a racial equity lens. And my question to you is, what was that starting point? What was y'all's working definition, and how did you build off of it? Because the report also highlights, that Black folks are overrepresented in poverty in the state of Michigan. 13% population, over 25% of Black folks make up poverty in the state of Michigan. So we're overrepresented there. So where were y'all, what was y'all starting point when we talk about racial equity, and how did
So
you
the first thing we did before we even convened our committee, when we first convened working groups, we had 14 state departments that were at the table for this work, because the governor wanted to harness, the governor did not want the work to be siloed. We didn't want it to be DHS and Leo is labor and economic opportunity. Okay, y'all the poverty people, so you go off and solve this problem. You know, every state department has a role in this work. And so she put 14 state department directors at the table, and then they appointed, you know, kind of their best and brightest, their innovative thinkers to come to the table with us and really analyze current state policies, you know, what people were doing in other states that has been successful. You know, what is the cutting edge thinking on these issues? And before, when we had our very first meeting, we had representatives from the Michigan Department of Civil Rights at every working group for their first meeting, to sit down with them and talk and walk them through just how we have to untangle race, the role of race in everything that we do. I happen to also be the equity and inclusion officer for Leo, and be intentional about that work from the start. It can't just be, oh, on the back end, we're just going to, you know, jerry rig some stuff so we can say, oh, we care about, you know, people of color too. And I use people of color in that context because we're talking about Black folks, and we're talking about, like, we have migrant workers in our state who are oppressed by poverty and oppressed by racism. You know, there are a lot of dimensions to this thing. So we had them come in, we had them talk about things like the Flint water crisis, how that was a policy decision, that wasn't the beginning of the policy decision. The policy decision began long before somebody switched to, when we had, emergency managers who were, you know, stealing the democracy of, or the ability for people to engage in democracy in our state in a way that kind of exploded. But even before that, you know, it's really about going back to, you know, as Donna said, the roots of it. You know, why are there Black communities? How did that emerge? So we just tried to be really intentional about looking at the history, but also really evaluating where we are today. So when we talk about a program, you know, one of the things that we really focused on is, you know, in this first report, and of course, this is the first of, you know, we'll have another report next year, we'll have reports in the meantime, but in this first list of recommendations, we really had a focus on how broken our benefit system is for the state of Michigan. It's just broken. It doesn't work. It doesn't serve people well. It diverts money to things that are, in my view, immoral. You know, it is immoral for money that's intended for the very poorest Michiganders to be spent for the most privileged Michiganders to go to private colleges.
So you're talking about the
every day in our state.
The needy family allocation, the temporary aid to needy family allocation.
Right. So TANF dollars. We get TANF dollars that come into our state as a block grant. So we as a state decide how that money is spent. The federal government sends it to us as a block grant. Now, among you know, the Midwest, Michigan we're an outlier. We're giving less than 20%.
Lagging. We're
lagging everybody. We're giving less than 20%, and you know, depends on how people you know, look at the numbers, but we know it's less. We know we have the lowest rate of TANF dollars that actually go to assistance to people who are living in poverty. Less than 20% of those dollars are used for that purpose. We're using, you know, when I just talked about college scholarships, we are literally giving $200 million every year for it. In the way that we give these we have college scholarships that we give to people who do well on standardized tests.
Regardless of income.
Who does well on standardized tests?
Yeah.
People who live in privileged communities. So we're diverting money that's intended for the very poorest Michiganders and giving it to the wealthiest communities for people to go. And the argument is, oh, well, college is an anti-poverty strategy. Nobody believes in that more than I do. I am an absolute true believer in the power of a college scholarship. I'm a former university board member. I believe it with my whole heart and whole soul that there's no better anti-poverty strategy than going to college. But if you live in West Bloomfield, you're going to go to college anyway. You don't need money for poor people to go to college.
But you know,
and I just don't think most Michiganders even know that that money is being used in that way. And that's what my role is. My role is to amplify the policies that don't work so that people are aware of them, and to really put some and to be if we want to get something done, we know the legislature is I'm a Democrat, the governor's a Democrat. We know that there's some tension between the legislature and the governor's office right now. There are some things that we think we can find, where we think we can find some alignment, but what we have now is not working, and it's wrong. It's morally wrong. Even if you're going from a efficacy standard, does it work? No, it doesn't work.
It's working for somebody, right? Right now, I mean, the people who get that money, it's working for them. And I think it's fair to say that that in the state of Michigan, in the same number of years where we've been diverting this money, you've had fewer poor people actually going to college than you have right now. And a lot of times our mindset now is, well, you know what? If you're poor, you probably shouldn't go to a 4-year college. You should go to a 2-year college. And we say this in all full seriousness, knowing that the likelihood of somebody even completing a full year of credits in a 2-year college in their hometown is less than 10%. Even with all of the promised scholarships in the world, it's really, really, really hard to get people who start at the community college level, who don't have a lot of family support, who are not economically stable, and who are not in a place where they have been ready for college when they went to college, to graduate. Mm-hmm. You'd be better off going to some of these other colleges like an HBCU than going to a 2-year college in the state of Michigan, because we know that doesn't work.
When I was on the Wayne State Board, and we rightly got hugely criticized because at one point our 6-year graduation rate for African American students was 11%.
Those retention rates were
it was outrageous. I couldn't understand why people weren't picketing us every day. But I don't want to call anybody out, but go ask somebody about these community college graduation rates. They never break 10%. They never break double digits. Never have.
Any kids there. And then once they go, let's talk about this. Once they go to community college, even if they get the promised scholarship, the money they get from this promised scholarship is the last money in. They are not getting a check from the promised scholarship for whatever the amount of money is. And usually the Pell Grant covers the full year. So you don't need your promised scholarship for that. And how many students, I was just reading this report not long ago about the number of students who can't afford textbooks, because somehow even with the promised scholarship, it's not covering textbooks, it's not covering room and board, it's not covering life expenses, it's not covering transportation. It's the last money in, and sometimes that means there's no money given to students, just a promise.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, Donna. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Orlando.
I just want to ask you this then, because we're talking, and that's just one example of how the TANF dollars have just been distributed in an equitable way. The number one recommendation.
Speak to that point, because I wanted to make a point about TANF, because one of the things that we discovered in our work is, so the way that people are able to get FIP dollars, which is, we have a very small pot of money for cash assistance. Everybody thinks that people still get cash assistance. Almost nobody gets cash assistance. And the people who get it are getting like $300 a month. So look at your budget and think about whether you can live on $300 a month for your family. Nobody can. So, but but the point I was going to make is, even in order to get that, you still have to have work requirements, and you have to go and check in with certain people at the state to make sure that you're on track and all this stuff. And this is what we found. One way that we're an outlier, the state of Michigan is an outlier, is that if you miss one appointment with your caseworker, for lack of a better term. That's not really what the title is, but okay. If you don't go in and check in about your work requirement, you lose a month of benefits, let's say. The second time, you lose a longer amount. The third time, you are banned for life.
How are you gonna punish? It's asinine to me that poor folks who have, who more than likely live in communities without access to mass transportation, probably don't have a car, probably, have a harder time getting from point A to point B, is punished.
But if you think that poor people are bad people, which is what we've been taught since at least 1980 and even before then, you want to punish them. I mean, there are people in our state government over the years who do want to punish. They want to punish poor people. I mean, there was legislation that was passed in 2015. If you have a child who is truant, then that's another way you can lose your benefits. Now, what population is more vulnerable to truancy than people who are living in poverty? You have transportation issues. You might not have as much flexibility with your work schedule. There are so many elements in people's lived experiences that just get ignored because people are just absolutely obsessed with being punitive. They want to punish people who are living in poverty. And that has been our paradigm, I think, unfortunately, in our state for far too long. And we have to have the courage to say, we have to have the courage to, first of all, amplify that this is happening, because I just don't think people know. I refuse to believe that if most Michiganders knew that money that was intended for the poorest Michiganders is going to the richest Michiganders for them to go to college when they were going to college anyway. They say that the reason that it's the anti-poverty, the reason that they justify using it that way is if you go to college, it'll prevent you from being a single parent. And that's why we should incentivize going to college. There's a way to incentivize going to college for the people who truly need to go to college. So when Donna talks about these folks who want to go to college but can't afford their books, don't have access to transportation, don't have access to, there are a lot of factors. I learned certainly as a university board member, tuition ain't the problem. It's the problem, trust me. College is not affordable, but it's not the only problem. And so one of the things we're doing with two of the proposals we have, or that actually are already in play, are Futures for Frontliners, which, as Donna mentioned, is a 2-year community college scholarship, but we have put wraparound programming into it. We're trying to be very intentional, because in my view, as someone who sat on a college table and heard people brag about the number of new students we had who were coming in the fall, I never cared about that number. That number means nothing to me. It was always who was graduating, because the only thing worse than not having a college degree is having no college degree and college debt. And too many of our people are getting in that position. And so I have always said, unless you get a college degree, we have a moral obligation. If we take you, we have a moral obligation to get you over the finish line. And so, when we set up Futures for Frontliners, when we set up the Reconnect program, which is, another program for people over the age of 25 who don't have degrees, we are really trying to be intentional about putting those supports in at the beginning, so that if you're a clerk at Myers who wants to go back and get your degree, but you have children at home and you don't have a car, and what can we do to make sure that you're successful? Let's think that through from the beginning.
And I think that with frontline workers, with older, responsible adults, community college is much more effective. You have greater maturity there. Yeah. You have greater motivation there. You have this distance. And sometimes it's like, sometimes you got to live life a little bit to appreciate college and say, I need more skills and more training. So I believe that targeting those programs is outstanding. I want to talk about frontline workers though, because COVID-19 taught us a whole lot. We learned that people need to have water in their homes in order for them to wash their hands so they don't give us the disease. And so we had to relearn how public health works. And now we know this. And so the water all got turned on and people, oh, wait a minute. It's no longer seen as a luxury, not because of our concern for poor people, just because, we're self-centered. We learned that people need homes to shelter in place, right? And so we have policies that are evolving and conversations about how to make water affordable and how to make housing affordable that would not have happened, in my opinion, without that. But the other thing is we now have this cool new term called essential worker. It's one of my favorite terms, right? Because essential worker really speaks to something that we have, all of the anti-Reagan stuff, but now we understood that the grocery store clerk was essential. Okay, the bus driver is essential. The garbage person or the sanitation worker is essential. The custodian is essential. And so now we can have a conversation about paying essential workers living wages, because we learned who we could not live without. Do you think that COVID-19 has somehow made the job of selling anti-poverty a little easier?
You know, I am optimistic that it will. I mean, that it has. Um, First of all, it laid bare the lived experiences of people who are living in poverty, because a lot of times with our legislature, their constituents who had never suffered or never struggled before were struggling because of COVID-19. And they recognize a lot of them were struggling before COVID-19, but just hiding it well. And when there was no hiding it anymore, and you start seeing the lines at the food banks and I think it was a wake up call for some people. But I think also on a federal level, thank God, hallelujah, we have leadership now that is really trying to institutionalize meaningful change as it relates to things like child tax credits, and really changing our system so that it is more so that we um, aren't punishing poor people or that we aren't using our tax dollars to punish poor people, which was kind of the paradigm for a long time. So I am hopeful that both on the state level and on the federal level, and I mean, we have seen even in the city of Detroit, where how long were people crying out for the end to water shutoffs and told it can't be done, we can't do it, we can't do it. And then COVID happened and we said, oh, we can do it. Then we said, oh, you know what, we might do this from now on now. And we're glad for the policy change, but it's not as if people just notice. I mean, you talked about the public health imperative that, we have to have clean hands in order to have, sanitary conditions. But that's not new information.
No,
But I think that it was in our faces. There was no ignoring it. There was no hiding it. And you were vulnerable. If I'm not clean, you're vulnerable. So there was a bit of a selfish motives in some ways too. I mean, we can't just we didn't want to let people just die in the streets.
Thank you for
but
saying that.
More importantly, when you die in the streets, you're risking my life too. So let's, so I think that I am very hopeful that we have a platform that we can work on now to say, here is what we learned from COVID-19 that we're doing in our state that ill serves low income people.
And this all goes back to
learn, and this is how we can fix it. Not just so that when we have the next pandemic, we are ready for it, but so that we have the society that we envision, that, we said the quote unquote American dream, that people have opportunity. The dream is opportunity. And we were very much, people, sociologists talk about two Americas. We've been there. We've always been two Americas.
And sometimes more than that, but several Americas, several Detroits, right? And several states, Michigan's. One thing, I always think about the governor, she ran on the platform to fix damn roads because we couldn't figure out a way to pay for our roads and everybody had to drive down the same crappy roads. But somehow people have been taught that austerity budgeting, austerity taxation is the thing. And at some point, you're so damn austere that you can't afford basic things. And we reached the bottom. Hopefully we hit the bottom of the barrel. And politics goes in waves. It doesn't go in one straight line. It doesn't go straight up in improving conditions for people, and it doesn't go straight down. At some point, we have political change, a change in the tides, We've had it since, this nation was
Mhm.
founded. There's been
Mhm.
times when Black people have been treated worse, and times we've been treated better. Times when you've
Mhm.
had workers' rights improve, and then they get worse.
Mhm.
And we had the New Deal, and you had the war on poverty, and then you had Ronald Reagan, and then you had Donald Trump, and you had all these other folks in between. But are we in another political epic? Is the question. Are we at a point
Wow, it's a
where we
great question.
understand? And the other aspect to that is, in the midst of all of this, we got global climate change. So while we were dealing with all of this, California was burning, Texas was freezing, and we have all of these issues, and we have to somehow rebuild the public coffers for all of
Mhm.
that. And that means new taxes. Everything
Say aloud.
about the roads, the very roads that still need to be fixed, but not all at the same time, but they still need to be fixed. Now we've got schools. I mean, we've got so many things all at once. And the question is, can we do without taxes?
Right.
And if not, is there the political will to raise them?
Well, it's really interesting that there are political leaders who like to point back to a moment in American history that when we were great, and a lot of times it's in their youth or when they, and it's when, certain people knew their place and that kind of stuff. But also what happened when we were quote unquote great is we paid more taxes. We were able to have institutions. That's when we started to have more people go to college. That's when we started to have an interstate highway system. Because if you want to say we were great, the greatness was we had shared sacrifice. And at some point, people convince themselves that shared sacrifice is for pansies and losers. you know, um, that paying $750 in taxes is the way to go, or nothing. And so there are people who are protecting the interests of someone like a Jeff Bezos to not pay any taxes for Amazon. Um, and somehow we have to be austere, but his company doesn't have to be austere. We have to make choices and by the way, of course, there's sacrifice, and not everyone is going to get everything that we want. But just like you said, we have to fix the roads eventually, and there's got to be planning, and there's got to be prioritizing, and not everything's going to be done at one time. But we have so deprived ourselves of the ability to, have um, just the staple, the things that used to just, we were so proud that we were the, well, that some people were proud that we had, we led the world in having these roads that were great and having the best K-12 system and having, 4-year colleges that were stellar and having all of these things that require revenue.
Right.
At some point, people acted like, I mean, and even you can see there was this decision that it's okay for us to put everything on the credit card some years. And then when we want to go back and invest and really do it smartly and be strategic about investing, we can say, well, the credit card is charged, is maxed out. Well, it's maxed out because you just gave all the rich people tax cuts. That's a decision that can be reversed.
Or
It can
you
be reversed here in our state, or even, this economic development planning that's all based on um, tax incentives. That is so last century. That is not, we're talking about, we need talent. I mean, we can't, the only thing that's going to get jobs, first of all, let's grow jobs here. I want to work at Orlando Company one day, or at the Bailey firm or something, why are we not, we can build with what we have. We have the brain power. We just have to nurture it. We have to train it and give it opportunity. And the way you do that is through education. It's through seeding entrepreneurship. It's through investing. And for some reason, we have developed this mentality that it's not investing, it's waste. And how can you ever waste when you're investing in
That's right.
the future of our communities? How is that ever? How can that ever be seen as waste when you do
well,
it the right way? Which we can do. We've done it before. We've
Right.
done it before
And
when it
we're
was
going to do
quote
it
unquote
again.
great.
I'm going to claim it today. We're going to do it again. The rescue package has been passed. It got passed without Republican support, even though Joe Manchin did support it, but it did get passed. And so now we have an opportunity to reinvest in our communities. So, what kind of money is coming to Michigan as a result of that? And how well will that address some of the things that you identified in your report on poverty?
Well, we're still putting our arms around that because we want to be very strategic in the way that we have meetings a lot in state government to talk about how can we deploy these dollars that are coming, these one-time dollars. My dream is we take these one-time dollars, and it's not just about getting them out of the door, although we want to get them out the door, but we want to build an infrastructure so that we I feel like we're in a case building year. So let us build the kind of case, build the kind of argument that these investments will pay off for Michiganders in such an irrefutable way that there will be no choice than to continue it when we don't have the American Rescue Plan. Let us put that infrastructure in place, those pillars in place, so that we have that long-term investment strategy. And I think there's a way. The good thing is that I think philanthropy is very invested in helping us get there. I think the business community, in some ways, like for example, one of the things the governor is really trying to be very intentional about is building a childcare infrastructure so that a lot of people describe the COVID-19 recession as a she session because women have been overwhelmingly more affected by losing their jobs or walking away from their jobs because they have to take care of their children. And so one of the things we have to do is have more options for quality childcare. I mean, that also feeds into preparation for school, which, again, I'm the education person. And so we're trying to have really innovative programming to help seed childcare opportunities. And what is encouraging to me, although it's in their self-interest, is that we are starting to see the business community say, yeah, we need to do something about childcare. Well, duh. We've been saying that for a long time. I mean, I don't mean to disparage the business community. I'm glad they're coming to the table, even if a lot of times it's their self-interest.
Give me her disclaimers. Her disclaimers.
I know. Can you go back and take out that well done?
But the thing is that, when we're back to essential workers, right? And now that people are not as desperate, people are actually demanding better things from employers, at least until the unemployment benefits run out. And, I think people are going to re-enter the workforce differently. And that means demanding more. And so hopefully, my optimistic person says we have been through so much pain and suffering. Let's hope and pray and dream about a nation that did not allow this tragedy to go to waste. That somehow we were taking every loss, every hit that we had, and we said, let's come back better. I don't want to use the build back better terminology because I never really liked that as a campaign theme, but let's come back better. Let's be better as a people. Let's be more loving. I don't believe that the greatest generation was a generation that was sticking fire hoses on school children and hanging my people on trees and keeping my people out of housing and burning crosses when our people moved into different neighborhoods. That was not the greatest generation. The greatest generation was not the people who mistreated soldiers returning from World War II, Black soldiers. And, the greatest generation is yet to come.
Absolutely.
We are growing the greatest generation, I hope, or at least a greater generation. The greatest generation is in front of us. And I think if we keep positive thinking, if we keep on saying, how do we work together to effect meaningful change, to restructure policing? If you don't defund them, just change them so they don't look at all the same as what they look like now, because it's a hot mess and you're not going to be able to train your way out of it. How do we use this to say everybody deserves a home, everybody deserves water? It is a human right, but it's also, we're all in this together. There's one planet. So I'm really try to be optimistic because the alternative isn't
Yeah,
great.
one of the things that I've been like really doubling down on is this notion of conscious citizenship that Ta-Nehisi Coates talk about. And he says, you know, be a citizen of this terrible and beautiful world. And it is an indictment on America's tendency toward rugged individualism and exceptionalism. I mean, it's the fight that we have every day online about public health, right? My conscious citizenship would not allow me to only think about me or my fears or believe and buy into conspiracy theories regarding the vaccine. Because I'm a conscious citizen and I care about everybody, I'm going to go ahead and chalk it up and, you know, suffer the side effects, you know. So I think with this, I think, Kim, the poverty report, I think it's a great starting point, right? I If we had more time, I would ask you about political expediency on part of the legislature, budget implications around some of these recommendations, but and even the number one recommendation being commissioning a study on how TANF dollars are distributed. And I'm like, okay, let's do that study, but let's not study to death. Let's really move
No.
the we got
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, I think a big part of it has to be case building, and that's why we recommended a study. But I want to be very creative in the way that we do study. So I'm thinking, you know, one of the things that we're talking about is a pilot where we look at comparing the way we do benefits now with maybe doing cash assistance, like direct assistance. You know, a lot of families, they don't want $300 a month. That's not going to raise them out of poverty. But you give them enough so they can get their car on the road, or you give them enough so they can pay some past bill that is, you know, stymieing their efforts to, you know, have any kind of economic stability. And they have a clean slate to actually build their own, or to be able to invest in themselves and be able to, they are just better strategies. And I'm looking at, you know, pilots where we say, this is what we do in column A. Here's another way forward. Why are we doing B? B is better. You know, that is, and so it can't just be, you're right, it can't just be studying. That is not gonna, you know, move the needle necessarily. Although I think it can, there is an element, I hope. Sometimes I wonder if there is still shame. I was gonna say there's an element of shaming elected officials, but I'm less convinced of that now. But I do think, you know, there are facts that if enough people and the right people are having the right conversations, that's how you get change. And so no one was talking about poverty at all. I mean, you were, Donna.
nobody,
I mean, people
and
were.
nobody
Let
in the
me not, let me,
2016
what I mean is no
election.
one in state government
Right.
in a meaningful way, in
Really?
a way where you're saying we need to change things. That has not happened in a very long time, because as Donna said, there's a shame and a stigma. There's a shame and a stigma to even use the word poverty. And so the first step is saying we have poverty. A lot of people who've been living in poverty, who were lived in poverty 3 generations, their progeny are still living in poverty. It's intergenerational. We're not coming up with solutions that are breaking those barriers, and we gotta get it. We've got to do better. And so I feel optimistic that the tragedy of COVID-19 and what it laid bare will be our launching pad to have meaningful change in our state. And if we don't, shame on us. But you know, my job is to really try to work the policy levers, and then also to try to change people's minds, because part of the reason why people feel protected in their policy making that stigmatizes and hurts poor people is because no one is holding them accountable, or no one is even challenging them. And so people, I need to stop saying that, because I'm saying that to the wrong people, because I know you all have been challenging it from day one.
No,
So there are people who are challenging it, but I mean, in government, the people whose job or whose passion is about consolidating power and wealth, hold them accountable and make them see us. And that's what we've got to do. And that's my job I'm so glad to have partners like you guys to help us with that job. With the work that you guys are doing at Bridge Detroit is really important in exposing that stuff. A lot of the stories that, I learned about the college scholarship scandal. People talk about the scandal of people putting their kids in good schools. The scandal is we're using money for poor people for rich people to go to college. That's a college scandal that everybody should be scandalized about. But I learned about it in the newspaper. We need media. Our last president wanted to vilify the press. The press is not perfect, but responsible journalism is critical to a democracy. And so, I just encourage you guys to keep doing what you're doing here on this podcast, Orlando, the work that you guys are doing, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm glad that we will continue to have conversations, and more than conversations, meaningful change.
Yep.
An amazing button to put on this conversation. Kim Trent, it is never enough time with you. We have to have you back. That's Kim Trent, everybody, the Deputy Director for Prosperity and the Equity and Inclusion Officer at the State of Michigan's Labor and Economic Opportunity Department. If you have any topics that you want discussed, just shoot us an email at authenticallybetrayed@gmail.com. Donna, do you have any shout outs?
I do. I want to shout out Kim Trent. I want to talk about this, right? I think it doesn't really take a lot of courage to talk about poverty, to scream at the rooftops, to curse people out and tell people off. But working within a state government system and being able to produce a report that brings together all of these different voices and that has all of these directors of departments really buying into not just, cosmetic change, but meaningful change in how they do business. Because I don't know if people realize that this poverty task force was the state folks saying, how can we be different? It was getting information from the community, but really it was the state bureaucrats saying, how can we be different? And that's not something bureaucrats say, okay? Like, how do we serve poor people? And it takes a special kind of leadership, not the kind that'll cuss you out and tell you off and put you on Front Street, but the kind of person who can really communicate well, see you, humanize the issue, and move it forward and come up with a win-win and say, how do we move this forward? And that is my girl, Kim Trent, right? So I knew when you got the job, you'd be perfect for it because you've been doing that for a minute. Thank you for your leadership. When I read that report, I want to just tell you how happy I was. I posted on Facebook, I sent it to you personally, and I'm going to give you your roses here. It made me so happy because I've been looking at this, like I said, for a minute. And so many of the things I was reading there, I've wanted to hear come from state government. And that's why I have optimism today.
Just to double down on that. Just to double down on that, you guys are absolutely right. Poverty and figuring out how to house our most vulnerable had not been on the radar of people running for office locally, regionally, in the state, and even the presidential election. Kim Trent and I were a part of a Free Press article during the 2016 election. That was when I was first associated with the Kim Trent. And that's when I realized that, wow, just a soldier who's willing to say what needs to be said, but also a soldier who is going to go into the system and make it work and try your hardest to make it work for the rest of us. That's not an easy job. And so my promise is to protect allies like you. We have to protect our folks who are working within the system to change it and not vilify them and not criticize them, but protect them. And so you always have our support, Kim Trent. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate you guys. I mean, and I really want you to hold us accountable. And that's what you do so well. There's a difference between vilifying people and talking about folks' mamas and dead daddies and whatever else, and holding them accountable. And I appreciate the way that you are able to know this community, to be fierce advocates for this community, and just visionary. Donna Givens Davidson is offering visionary leadership. And, I know that you sat at her right hand for a long time. You can't help but get some of that brilliance dropped on you. But you had it, and the reason she brought you to the table is because you had it. And so I look at somebody like you, Orlando, and I feel optimistic because I don't know, people try to talk about millennials and Generation Z. I love them. I think that they are free in a way that other generations of Black people, not just because of their circumstances, but because of internalized self-hatred, internalized oppression. Uh, you all are able to be free in a way that really inspires me. And so I just thank you for the example that you set, and for the work that you guys do every day too. So thank you so much for inviting me to have a conversation with you today.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Prayers to Dante Wright's family, his child's mother and his parents. Prayers to the family of DMX. And I want to give a special shout out, and she'll know why, to my friend, Candace Fortman. Thank you for being Candace Fortman. We thank you so much for listening. We hope
Candace
to see
Fortman
you next time.
is all of everything.
Everything.
She's the best.
Thank you for
all
listening.
Of everything.
Catch the wave, y'all.